Last week, we gave you a list covering what we felt were the top Bionicle sets throughout the course of its run, but it's easy to judge a set based on the merits of its individuality. But what would happen if we added the sheep back to its flock? Which group would stick out, and which one is better? Let's put that question to the test. I'm Barterin, and this is the Top 10 Bionicle Waves. Let's kick this list off at number 10. The Summer of 2009. This wave is notorious for being the final, real wave of Bionicle. Yes, we're excluding the Bionicle stars, trust me, we're better for it. Despite the mostly polarizing effect the new location and the quote-unquote reboot had on the community, the sets were actually pretty cool. The entire year introduced some very vibrant colors and pretty solid builds, and the summer wave was no exception. Not only did we get some very diverse cast of characters, but we also got to see one of the main figureheads of Bionicle in set form for the very first time. And we can't forget those super awesome, yet pretty pricey vehicles that were introduced in 2008 and continued in the summer wave of 2009. The vehicles added something very different to Bionicle, and if you could afford them, were pretty awesome sets on their own merits. But that hefty price tag really does bring this wave down, because at $368, this is the most expensive wave on the entire list. And keep in mind, this was only for half of the year. Moving on to our next pick at number 9, we have the Summer Wave of 2002. This wave would mark the first time we would ever see our Toa heroes upgraded for the very first time, which was a pretty big deal considering we had no clue what the structure for the line was going to be after the first year. And we can't forget about the awesome Exo Toa and Kadak and Gadak, of whom contain some pretty awesome biting functions. Overall, the wave was pretty solid and wasn't that expensive either, giving it a place on this list. But moving on to number 8, we have the Winter of 2008. Look at that. That worked out pretty well, huh? This wave introduced the return of the nostalgic Toa Nuva, as they faced their greatest enemy yet, the evil Makuta. This premise was already pretty cool enough, but add on some awesome jetpack flying action, and you've got yourself a pretty awesome wave. Not only that, but while the Toa sets were sort of standard, they did kind of resemble their initial counterparts. At least Kopaka did, and you could argue that Liwa and Pohatu had a bit of a semblance. More so than the summer wave of 2008 at least. But really the highlights of this wave were the Makuta sets. They brought a really unique, vampiric look to the line, something we haven't really seen before, and looked unmistakably evil. But also pretty cool is that they offered a brand new torso piece, which, while it wasn't really used much in Bionicle after that point, was at the very least a breath of fresh air, because we had basically seen nothing but Anika builds for the past 2 years. We also got some pretty cool Titan sets, such as Makuta Icarax and the Toa Ignika, which included the Mask of Life in set form for the first time, without a weird giant Paraka face sticking out the back. Overall, a really cool wave, and at only $155, the price was pretty hard to beat. This next wave is kind of odd. We weren't really sure how to properly go about incorporating this into the list because of weird release patterns internationally. So while there were technically 2 waves, we're just going to lump them together into one. So speaking of one, at number 7 we have the entire year of 2001. This was the wave that started it all and introduced many of the concepts that Bionicle still uses to this day. The big highlight for this wave are the bright colors, which were kind of dropped by 2004 onwards. The play value, which, despite not having posable limbs, was given a lot of merit due to the awesome gear functions, the simple yet memorable and nostalgic mask designs, and the Rahi sets, which had various unique and cool functions that made them fun to build and fun to play with. And funny enough, but despite us combining both waves into one, this still evens out cheaper than the summer of 2009. But next up, at number 6, we have the Summer of 2006. Hey, it worked out again. Now, this was a really interesting direction for Bionicle. Many would mark this year as the first step towards a darker, more mature theme. And the promotional artwork for the new Toa sets definitely put that out on display, with some very posable, very detailed, and very alien-looking sets. And while some might find their angsty look to be a little too much, you can't really ignore the fact that these were the first Toa sets that give us a full range of articulation. Their only real drawback is the weird decision to make their mask uncompatible with past heads, and the fact that they're kind of all clone sets. But the wave makes up for it with its Titans, which are arguably the best Titans we've ever had, featuring some really solid builds and extra stability. And with their very unique silhouettes, they definitely stole the show for this wave. But moving on to number 5, we have the Summer of 2003. This wave made a big contribution to Bionicle as a line, because because it marked the first time we actually got limb articulation in the joints. Granted, it was only really for the knees of the Rakshi, but still a cool feature nonetheless. But this wave also featured some really cool Titan sets. Notably being Toa Takanuva, who was our first Toa that we had ever seen outside of the original Toa Mata, making this the first time we had learned that the Toa and the Matoran were part of the same species. But also notably, we got our first look at Makuta Pterodax in set form, which was a pretty big deal considering he's our main baddie for the line. This was a pretty solid wave, and was also the cheapest wave on this list, at $144, which is a major contributor to why it outperforms some of the other waves on this list. But moving on, we have at number 4, the Winter Wave of 2009. This wave is on this list for a lot of the same reasons that the Summer Wave of 2009 was. Despite mostly using just the Unika build, it was still able to capitalize on some pretty unique and solid designs, bringing a return of the elements as a core focus of their aesthetic. This left us with an incredibly diverse and colorful cast of characters, which showed us that you can use the Unika build pretty effectively without having to just make carbon copies of each other. This wave was definitely one of LEGO's best. Moving on to the final 3, at number 3 we have the Winter of 2004. This was a hard decision for us at TTV to make. We couldn't really decide if 2004 was truly better than 2009 or not, because while we do feel that the Toa Metru are incredible Toa sets that feature both design and function, they were also fairly clonish and had some pretty dull color schemes. And while we also felt the Titan sets for 2004 were pretty solid, they didn't quite add enough to the wave to really put it at number 3. So why does it rank ahead of 2009? Really what it came down to was inflation. Because while the Glatorian were pretty awesome sets, and objectively speaking a bit better than the Metru, they were also a heck of a lot more expensive. The canister sets for 2009 were all $13 each, with the Toa Metru only being $8. To put that into perspective, that's the same price as a Protector. Our Toa heroes, our main characters, the main draw for that wave, being the same price as what we would consider a small set to be nowadays. You could get the entire cast of characters for nearly half the price of what it would cost in 2009. And for kids who usually don't have a lot of disposable money, this was kind of a big deal, which earns this wave its spot on the list. At number 2, we have the Winter Wave of 2007. It wouldn't really be fair if we were going to include 2009 for being unique with the Unika build and not mention the Baraki. These sets were design powerhouses, blowing all of our expectations out the water. No pun intended. These cast of characters were very diverse, very colorful, and had some pretty fun builds. And we can't forget the presentation. I mean, those canisters were pretty cool. The Baraki alone justify the spot at second place, but we also got some pretty solid Matoran builds, which used to be my favorite Matoran sets. Throw in some Hydruka and a decent Titan set like Nocturne, and you've got yourself an incredibly balanced and versatile wave. But it doesn't quite top our number 1 pick, which I'm sure many will disagree with. But to us, we felt that the number 1 spot for the best wave in the entirety of Bionicle's run goes to the Winter Wave of 2015. There's a lot of reasons why this wave is really cool. From a fan perspective, just seeing the original wave of Toa back on shelves again gets our nostalgia juices pumping. And the best part about it is that it seems like LEGO actually made the effort to make these Toa appear familiar to what we've gotten before, which is something I wish I could say for our past Toa upgrade incarnations, which had a habit of not looking anything like their past selves. From a buyer perspective, it's easier for a fan to go into a store and purchase something that they can easily recognize and identify with. Iconography is important for a brand and shows that a lot of time and dedication was put into the design aspect of these sets, giving a larger sense of care and attention that seemed to be lacking prior. But even from a pure set standpoint, these sets contain some of the best features out of all of the waves we've included on this list. An incredible balance of form and function, reintroducing the gears that we haven't seen for the past 10 years, while also maintaining some great posability. They also bring back elemental aesthetic, having bright, vivid colors and cool new tools that legitimize the regions they call home, and the elements that they can control. They also have a sense of uniformity, while still maintaining diverse and unique builds between each set, allowing them to look the part of a team, but without having to be direct clones of each other. They also make great use of the CCBS system, which sure might not be everyone's cup of tea, but is still an effective building system that is both complex and simple at the same time, and allows for these builds to really convey that these are warriors. Top it off with some pretty intricate and gratifying small sets in the protectors, you've got yourself a really strong comeback for Bionicle, and it's kind of hard to see how LEGO's gonna top this wave in the future. But that's just our thoughts. What are yours? Post your very own top 10 Bionicle waves in the comments below, and be sure to continue the discussion on the TTV message boards at board.ttvpodcast.com. I'm Vardaran, and thanks for watching.